Hello, my synthwaving friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in this beautiful world. It's the perfect day for synthwave and certainly the perfect day for melody. Alrighty. So today we're going to have a great session. I'm going to show you how to use non-chord tones when writing your synthwave melodies. In my opinion, learning how to use non-chord tones properly will make the difference between run-of-the-mill melodies and melodies that stand out and are expressive and emotional. I see here Alexander, Darkside, Cole Daniels, Synthwave Dojo community members in the house. Thank you very much for your support, guys. And I think this session is gonna kind of also wrap up the melody writing saga that I started, like a month or 2 months ago, where I've gone through all the introductory theory of how to write melodies, and we looked at the building blocks of melody, which are motifs, and how to turn them into phrases and periods and sentences, then how to develop your melodies using rhythm and using pitch. And one of the things that I hadn't covered up until now was using non-chord tones. And my recommendation all along this time has been focused mainly on chord tones, or the chords that make up, or the tones that make up the chords that you're playing, because non-chord tones are tricky and they need special treatment. So focus mainly on that. However, if you've only used or mostly used chord tones up till now, you'll figure out that your melodies will tend to sound like arpeggios or sound stable, and there's like some pizzazz and some flavor lacking, and that's precisely what non-chord tones is gonna bring to the table. A lot of flavor, flair, and some surprises that will definitely help in the unity, in the variety department. So great stuff planned today, guys. So let's get into the DAW. Oh, and before we get into the DAW, the content that we're gonna cover today, I've updated the Synthwave Composer's Melody Reference Book, so everything we'll cover today is in there. It's like one of the last chapters of the final sections of the book. You can get this ebook for free. Follow the link in the description of this video, or head over to synthwavedojo.com/downloads, and then just scroll down and try to find the Synthwave Composer's Melody Reference Book. I updated that to version 1.6 today. It's completely free of charge. You don't need to provide your email sign up or any of that BS. Just head over there and download the ebook. Cool. So this is what we're going to be using. And all along these past weeks, I've added like so much stuff. Really, this is a very useful tool that if this is the first time you're watching one of my live streams and this is the first time that you see this melody, go back and this book, go back and watch all the videos where I cover the melody strategies. Certainly work your way through the ebook, because it's super handy. All right, non-chord tones, as I mentioned, it's the last section here in the book. And before we get into plugging and playing notes, there's just a little bit of theory that I wanted to cover. Alrighty, so non-chord tones, and most of this I got straight from this open music theory course called Music Theory for the 21st Century Classroom. I left the link here, and go to this website, explore this free music theory course. There's a couple of them out there. This is very good. It can get quite technical, and certainly at times it's hard to decipher what is really useful in the context of synthwave and electronic music versus classical music. So I think at some point I will create a free music theory course based on this one. I don't know, I'm still evaluating that. I don't know if how many of you out there would be interested in that. Just let me know in any case in the comments, and I'll see if I get to that eventually. But in any case, most of what I'm showing here today comes straight from this music theory course, which is open source. And all right, so non-chord tones, as its name implies, are notes that do not belong to the chord that you're playing. So if you're playing a C major chord in bar 1 of your progression in your synthwave track, C major is comprised of C, E, G. So any note that does not belong to that chord, C, E, G, is going to be a non-chord tone. And these non-chord tones are sometimes called embellishing tones or non-harmonic tones, meaning they do not belong to the harmony or to the chord that you're playing. And they are classified by how they are approached and left, either by same tone, step, or leap. So certainly, like I mentioned, non-chord tones will embellish your melodies and will bring a lot of flavor, surprise, and very interesting elements and bring a lot of variety. And as I read here, you have to treat them, depending on which one you're using, you have to learn how to apply them correctly. So a concept that we'll look into is the approach and left, meaning what note you play before the non-chord tone, that's how you approach the non-chord tone. And then once you play your non-chord tone, what's the next note you're going to play? That's the note that you're going to use to exit or to leave that non-chord tone. So again, in the context of non-chord tones, we need to learn what to use before it and what to use afterward properly, because depending on what you do, it's called something differently, and it's going to help this whole concept of non-chord tones work. Is hinged on that, what you use before and what you use after. So there are 9 types of non-chord tones, and we're going to cover them all and look at examples. We have the passing tone, the neighbor tone or neighboring tone, Apogitura, escape tone, double neighbor, anticipation, pedal point, suspension, and retardation. I know these words sound very fancy, but I'm going to explain them very simple, in a very simple way to you. And again, I'm going to show you how to use them. So don't be afraid about all of these fancy terms. And there's quite a lot of them. So I'll just keep going. So I make sure that we cover everything within an hour-ish, right? And we're not here 2 or 3 hours. And there's a couple of things to consider. For example, there's qualifiers that can be applied to non-chord tones. They can be accented or unaccented, meaning occurring on the strong beats within the bar. The strong beats in a bar are the 1 and the 3. Those are the strong downbeats. The weak downbeats are the 2 and the 4, but they are still downbeats. Also, weak beats or unaccented beats are the spaces between the downbeats. So the 3/16 notes between the first beat and the second beat, all of those are also considered weak beats or unaccented beats where you could place notes. All right. Then we have chromatic, meaning belonging to the key or sticking to the scale that we're using, that would be diatonic. In the case of synthwave, we're not gonna touch upon chromatic at all. We're always gonna stay in key or in the scale. That's easier, and that's what you're gonna mostly hear in synthwave. All right. Then there's the concept of submetrical, meaning if it's a note smaller than a beat, or supermetrical, larger than a beat. I'm going to touch upon these kind of indirectly, but I'm not going to specifically call them out. And just to summarize this table, again, you'll see that some of these non-chord tones, you approach them by a step, by a leap, or by the same note, and then you leave them by either a step in the same direction, a step in the opposite direction. So there's a lot of rules or ways to use them. And some of them can be accented or unaccented. Some of them, they have to be accented to work well, or unaccented. And again, this is just the broad strokes, but I'm going to show all of you how this works in a few seconds. Alrighty. So let's start with the first one, passing tones. A passing tone is a note that you use to pass between chord tones in a stepwise motion. Remember that stepwise motion, or moving in steps, is moving in the distance of a second, either a minor second or a major second. That's considered a stepwise motion. Anything bigger than a second is considered a leap, or that would be moving in leap-wise motion. So a passing tone, and it's okay if you don't read music notation because I'm gonna explain it to you very, very easily. So a passing tone is a note, a non-chord tone that you place between two chord tones, and typically you move by a step. Okay, so in this case, this is an E, okay, and this other chord tone is a G, and we assume this is in the, let's see, the chord here is E flat, so E flat has both E flat and G flat, and we're playing this note that is directly in between, and from E flat to F, it's a minor second or just a semitone. Okay, so we're respecting the first rule that we're moving in stepwise motion, and it's important that the passing tone has to be moving in the same direction of the chord tone. So for example, here's our chord tone. We want to get to this other chord tone, so we couldn't call this a passing tone if we went a half step down, because it wouldn't be going in the same upward direction of the chord tone. So that's also important. It has to go in the same general direction that you're moving, either up or down, right? And it has to move by a step, so a half tone or a whole tone. So this is a passing tone. Very simple. Now, let's head over into the DAW and make it come alive. So I have this very simple chord progression dressed up as synthwave, consisting of 1 bar of A minor, 1 bar of G major, 1 bar of F major, and back to 1 bar of G major. All this is in the key of A minor and sounds like this. Easy stuff. Let me just loop it over here. All right, great stuff. So the first one is a passing tone. All right, so, and I'm gonna show you all these techniques and all these non-chord tones in just very simple examples at first, and then I'm gonna try to wrap it all together using trying to create a melody with some or all of these techniques. But for now, I'm just gonna show them to you like piecemeal, bits and bobs, and towards the end, we'll create a complete melody that uses some, most, or all of these concepts. Great. So we said passing tone simply means we have a chord tone, another chord tone, and we place a non-chord tone in between, and it has to go in the general direction and a distance of a step. All right, so let's say I have A minor here, and we have C. Well, A, not yet. This is the chord of A minor, and let me just to make this easier. Okay, A minor. I should have done this before our session, guys, so I apologize. This is A, C, E. Do this quickly. GBD. F, A, C. Just so it's easier to refer to the chord tones. Not have to mention them every time. Awesome. Okay, so these are the tones that make up each chord: A, C, E, GBD, F, A, C, and GBD. All right. Here's where we were. Awesome. So here's one chord tone. We're starting with A. I have another chord tone here, C. And in between them, we can use B. Okay, so between A and C, there's only one note, and it doesn't belong to the chord. And we can use it to bridge the gap between these two non-chord tones. So this simple example sounds like this. Let me make it shorter. Cool. We're moving in stepwise motion and bridging the gap between these two notes. If we didn't have this non-chord tone here, we can feel a bit of a leap here, and it's not bad. But maybe if we wanted our melody to not have such a big leap at the start, we can bridge the gap with a non-chord tone. Easy peasy. Once again. All right. This is a passing tone. Now, we also have double passing tones. So, for example, we could use two non-chord tones to bridge the gap between two chord tones. In this example, we only have one note or one tone between these two pitches. So the easiest thing to do was just obviously use B as the passing tone. However, if we wanted to climb here up to, let's say, E. Okay, maybe this example, let's do E and A. Between E and A, there are two notes. We have F and we have G. So, to bridge this gap, we're gonna play them both. Okay, so this is a double passing tone. Again, we're going in the same direction, in this case, upward. And the distance between these tones is still a step or a half tone or lower. In this case, there's a whole tone or lower. There's a half tone or semitone between E and F. There's a whole tone between F and G, but that still works. And there's a whole tone between G and A. So this is how this would sound. Okay, once more. Okay, cool. Double passing tone. And what if we wanted to go from E, let's say, or from C to A, just to show you an example that goes the other direction. Well, in this case, there's also only one tone from A to E. Could go down to G and then F. Okay, in this general direction trending downward, we used G and F to bridge the gap between A and E. Cool. And obviously, I'm just coming up with very simple examples. Maybe this is not going to sound like, wow, man, like the coolest melody I've ever heard. Of course not. These are just things that I'm coming up on the fly. Maybe not too rhythmic, maybe a little boring, but I'm just trying to show you the theory. And like I said, towards the end, we'll work on something that sounds more appropriate to synthwave, or that, makes more sense and sounds better. Cool. That was the double passing tone. All right, now let's approach, or let's cover neighbor tones. Neighbor tones, they move away from a chord tone, either by a step or half step, and then return to the same chord tone, and that's important. For example, let's say we have A here, okay, and we are going to return to A here. Okay, so the neighbor tone, we move away from a note by a step and then return to the same note. There are two notes, one above and one below, that can be considered the neighbor. So if we go one step above, we have B. Okay, so we go one step above to the neighbor note above, and then come back to the original chord tone. This is how it sounds. Cool. And we have a neighbor tone below the note, in this case, G. So we do our chord tone, the low neighbor tone, and then go back to the original chord tone. And it sounds like so. Okay. So remember, whenever we use a neighbor tone, we have two options, either the one above or the one below, okay? Now, it's important that for this to be considered a neighbor tone, we have to come back to the original tone. If this A were, let's say E, this wouldn't be considered a neighbor tone because we're bridging the gap between two different notes. This could possibly be a passing tone or something else, right? But again, for this to be considered a neighbor tone, we have to come back to the original. And for example, with neighbor tones, you can do cool stuff like, let's see, or something like this. Okay, so here I have my chord tone. I'm going down to the neighbor, come back to the chord tone, use the upper neighbor, and on and on. Cool. Or I could do this with a faster type of note, like so, and oh, not what I wanted. Let me see. Bad example. I was just thinking of something like, let me do it manually, like this. Oops, I'm making a mess of this whole thing here. Okay, finally. Something that looks weird. Okay. Now this is going to sound like a kind of fast arpeggio, but it's all neighboring tones, going to the low neighbor, then the high neighbor, and coming back to A. So it kind of sounds like an arpeggio, but it's not quite. Remember that an arpeggio would be ACE. So this is kind of also another way of creating something similar to an arpeggio, but maybe not so trite, right, that everyone has listened to 1,000 times. You can make use of neighbor tones in this manner. Of course, we would need some variation after this or somewhere around here so it doesn't sound so robotic and boring, but you get the gist of it. Okay, so this is the neighbor tone. Now, similar to the passing tone, we have a double neighbor, okay? And the double neighbor is when you have the same chord tone, and in between, we're going to use the two neighbor tones. For example, like this. Here, consider that we had the chord tone, then we use one neighbor tone and come back to the original and then use the other neighbor. With a double neighbor, we're going to do something, for example, like this, where we're going to go to one of the neighbors, then directly to the other without coming back to the original chord tone, right? So we have the two neighbors in between the chord tone. Okay, and if I wanted to do something similar like I just showed you, right? And obviously it doesn't have to be like this. Let's do something more normal, maybe. Cool. So it doesn't matter the rhythm that you use, as long as you're using both neighbors, the high and the lower neighbor, before returning to the original chord tone. This is a double neighbor. Cool. All right. Next up, Apogitura, and this is I think an Italian word, and it means like support. And the Apogitura is approached by a leap, so a distance bigger than a step, and it is left or exited by a step. And this is important. This is what makes the Apogitura. We come into the Apogitura using a big jump, but we leave the Apogitura by using a tiny step. Usually, the non-chord tone or the Apogitura lands on the beat, is accented on a strong beat, and makes it a particularly expressive non-chord tone. And this is also important. Both the leap and the step away from the Apogitura can be from any direction. We'll see, like the escape tone and some others, that there's a specific way that if you leap, let's say in a certain direction, you approach in a certain direction, you exit by the opposite direction. In the Apogitura, you can approach and leave from any direction that you like. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So the first thing is Apogitura is usually accented. And this is also important because for the Apogitura, we need a note, a specific note or kind of note to come before it and another one after it. I cannot start my melody on an Apogitura. Well, I could in a different context because I need a note before it. That would be an anacrusis, but I'm not going to get into the details. So I'm going to start writing my melody just for the sake of this example on G. Okay, so let's say that I want to play G. Okay. Oops. Actually, I'm going to play A on top of G. Remember, this is a non-chord tone. It is accented, so it's going to land on the beat. Cool. And it says that I need to approach it by a leap. So the note before it has to be a distance greater than a step. So a third, a fourth, or a fifth will work. And in this context, let's say, let's use C. Okay, from C to A, that's a minor third. A minor third is bigger than a step, or this is a leap, so this will satisfy that condition. But then it says that we need to leave our Apogitura by a step. Okay, so it means that, remember, this A is a non-chord tone, so I have to move to the closest non-chord tone by the distance of a step. And I have two. I could go either to B, which is a whole step away from A, or I could go to G, which is a whole step down from A. In this context, let's just use G, since it's the tonic or the root note of this chord. And here we have satisfied approaching by a leap, and we're leaving by a step. And this is how it sounds. Okay, once again. And the cool thing about these non-chord tone techniques, and specifically this first one, the Apogitura, is now that we can land on downbeats using non-chord tones, but appreciate that we need to leave the chord tone by doing something else. And most likely, the faster you leave the Apogitura, the better. Because if we were to stay on this Apogitura, for example, for what is this, like 2 beats, okay, it sounds a little tense, right? So let's try to keep the Apogitura short and as fast as we can move on to a chord tone. Okay, but this is the cool thing about the non-chord tones, that now we can land on the downbeat or like on the first beat of a bar using a non-chord tone, and we have a way to get out of it and have it sound cool. This is why the theory said, like I read, that this can make for very expressive melodies. All right, once more. And feel how there's like a bit of a anticipation or a feeling of hesitation when I stay on A, like more than a beat. It's like we're anticipating something to happen, and once we get to G, it's like, oh, okay, well, we landed somewhere that felt safe. Let's listen to that again. Cool, right? Moving on, then we have the escape tone. Hello from Crimea, cool. So the escape tone, we're gonna approach it by a step and leave or exit by leap. And this is the opposite of the Apogitura. The Apogitura, we approached by leap and left using a step. The escape tone is the other way around. We approach by step and we leave by a leap. But this is important. Here, it is specifying that we need to exit in the opposite direction from which we came. The Apogitura, there's no specification of once you leave, do you go up or you go down? It's all up to you. But for an escape tone to be an escape tone, you have to exit by a leap in the opposite direction. Okay, cool. So here, an easy example to remember is the end of the Star Spangled Banner or the national anthem of the US. The word of, as that comes before in the home of the brave, is an escape tone, and it is usually unaccented. This is also important. Okay, so it's unaccented. Whether the Apogitura was usually accented, so that's also another difference. So in the phrase when you say in the home of the brave, this is an escape tone. And notice how we're going from, this is E flat, going down to C, and we escape in a different direction. All right, so let's take a look at this. So, approach by step, left by leap in the opposite direction, usually unaccented. Okay, so let's do this. Here is G. This is a chord tone. Okay, then let's say I want to play A here, just to keep things simple. Okay, so this is a non-chord tone. So I have to do something, I have to approach my non-chord tone and then leave it or exit in a specific way. And this, the theory says that we need to approach it by a step. Okay, so this is going to be my step here from B to A. That's a whole tone. Okay, and I'm approaching it descending into the escape tone. And I need to leave by a leap in the opposite direction. So if I approached by descending, I'm gonna escape by a leap ascending. So for example, here, I'm leaping up, and the distance between A and D is a perfect fourth. So this satisfies the condition. A leap is, remember, anything bigger, or a third, either minor or major, is a leap. So a perfect fourth is bigger than that. So this satisfies the other condition. And let's take a listen. Let's make this distance here shorter. Cool, I like that. Great. So this is our escape tone. We approach it by step, exit by leap in the opposite direction. Now let's do it differently. Just so we approach it from the other direction, like the inverse. Let's say our non-chord tone is gonna be C. Okay, cool. So in this case, we're gonna use B as a stepping stone to ascend into our escape tone, and we need to exit by a leap in the opposite direction. So let's exit with G, which is a distance higher or a distance greater than a second, and we're going in the opposite direction of a step up into it. We're going down, all right? So that satisfies all the conditions. Let's take a listen. Cool. We could certainly make the escape tone longer, but that makes it more tense. But still, it's very musical and very usable. It's very colorful. It's like if you blink, you miss it, right? It doesn't draw too much attention to itself because of the way that it is handled with the approach and the exit. It sounds very musical and it sounds very cool. All right. That's the escape tone. We have anticipation, pedal point, suspension. Ooh, we have a bunch of them to go through, so I'll just be hasty here. Escape tone. Anticipation tone. Anticipation is a non-chord tone, okay, that, as its name suggests, anticipates the arrival of the next chord and is often found at cadences, as in the next example. We're going to forget about that. And important, is usually unaccented. Okay, so anticipation, or it means that we're going to play a chord that it is a non-chord tone at the moment, but it is going to become a chord tone on the next bar once the chord changes. So for example, if while we're playing on here on A, if we play G, G doesn't belong to A minor, but G does belong to G major. So here we're anticipating the chord change. And let's see the rules. We're anticipating the arrival of the next chord, usually unaccented. So either in the fourth beat or in between the beats. And in this case, we're landing on beat 4. So I'm just going to create a very, simple throwaway melody here to kind of fill in the gaps with something. Okay. Let's take a listen. Okay, cool. So here, when we played this G, it wasn't a chord tone. We're anticipating the chord change. And let me see if that is mentioned here. Okay, usually unaccented. But we can hold this chord or play it when the chord change comes. In this example, I hold this note throughout the chord change. But even if I play this note here and play it once again, this is also considered an anticipation. So whether you play the same chord tone once the chord changes, or if you hold on to it and create this long tone that persists or sustains across the bar change or the chord change, this is also considered an anticipation, because ultimately what we're doing is playing a chord that on this, playing a tone that on this chord doesn't belong to the chord, but does belong to the one after it. Let's play it one more time. Cool. Next up, pedal point. Pedal point is a very useful technique that I like very much. And there's a lot of synthwave producers that use this. Not so much in melody, but when you play arpeggios and certain melodic elements, well, now I contradicted myself. And for pads, this is a great technique that you can use for pads. So a pedal point is a note that is held throughout changing harmonies or changing chords. So it starts out as a chord tone, but then it becomes a non-chord tone under the next chord, okay? And so on and so forth. Pedal points are often used in the bass voice, okay? And because the term pedal relates to the foot pedals on an organ, but not necessarily. You can also use them in pads or in melody. When the pedal point is in the bass, it's not necessarily because you're specifying the inversion of the chord, okay? And you can also consider that you can use the pedal point in a higher voice, such as we're using now, or how I'm going to show you, use it for melody. And then there's also the concept of a double pedal point, which is playing two notes at the same time that you sustain or hold on to throughout changing chords. And a very solid strategy for using pedal point that always works is using the tonic of the key or of the scale or key we are in. So the tonic will always work 100% of the time. Using the dominant or the fifth degree of the scale will always work 100% of the time. And a double pedal point, if you use the tonic and the fifth of the key or the scale it's a double whammy of the sound, and it always works well. And that one in particular sounds super cool on pads. All right, so let's take a listen and let's create some examples. So we said pedal tone. Okay, here, let's use it kind of melodic. This tone, if I hold it throughout the entire progression, the harmony is changing here, the chords are changing. A is the tonic or the root note in A minor, but it's a non-chord tone on G, so there's going to be some tension here. It becomes a chord tone again on top of F, but it's the third, okay, as opposed to the tonic here in A minor, so it has a different flavor, but still consonant. And then it becomes again a non-chord tone on top of G. So throughout this chord progression, we're going to go on a bit of a journey from stable to unstable, stable again, and a little less stable than where we started, back to unstable, all just playing one tone, right? Kind of think of it as automating this change in mood by just using one tone. It sounds like this. A little bit of tension, more stable, back to the tension. Okay, and like I said, we can also use a double pedal. In this case, we're gonna use A and E. Since we are in the key of A minor, E is the fifth of the scale, and both of these together and it's a double whammy because E, or the fifth of the scale, is a chord tone here, is not a chord tone here, is not a chord tone here, it's actually the seventh, and is not a chord tone. So this one introduces more dissonance or more instability than A. So it's cool because these two pair together, this dynamic duo. One is mostly stable and the other one is less stable. So when you mix them and play them both together, you create a very cool sound. And doing something like this with pads is very popular in synthwave. Like if you want to play a pad and not have it change on every chord, right? Just have a sound that constantly sustains and gels your whole arrangement together. A great choice is either the tonic or the fifth, the dominant, or both of them at the same time, and it will work wonders. And for example, College, off the top of my head, he uses this pedal tones and double pedal tones like this all the time, right? And you don't necessarily have to only use the tonic and the fifth. You can use any other tone that you want, but depending on what you use, it could have more instability, less stability, or more consonant or more dissonance, right? For example, if we were to use C, or let's say D, it feels different than A and E, obviously. Or if we were to use B, this one I think is going to sound pretty dissonant. Cool, but you can use it to introduce tension. For example, if you had this track going by using B as a pedal tone, you give it like kind of this cinematic, mysterious vibe. You can, by just playing that single note kind of in the background with reverb and maybe with a filter that moves a little bit, this sustaining sound could introduce a lot of like mystery into your section. Cool. And if I were to introduce, or let's say use two pedal points that are in the tonic and the fifth, maybe we could do B and D. Feel how the music starts to sound very different from the vanilla chords that we started out with, especially here on top of F. It sounds very different. It sounds super, not dissonant, but sound of unstable, like unrooted, like something happened to this chord. But then we go back to consonants. Cool. double pedal tone. And of course, you don't necessarily have to play one tone across the entire thing, like I just did. We could have one pedal tone across these two chords, and then we can use a different pedal tone on top of the other chords. And here, I'm just moving up a semitone or a half step, and I'm introducing a little bit of movement inside of my pedal tone usage. Very mysterious dark there. Now more consonant, brighter, back to the mysterious dark. Cool. All right, that's the pedal tone, and when using this in a melodic context, you could do something like this. Let's say we're playing a here, and I'm just gonna type in or pencil in some random notes. Let's say at the end of this bar, I want to introduce this pedal tone, and then go on with my chord tone stuff. Okay, so this is also another way to use it more in a kind of melodic context, not like a pad or something that is gonna stay there in the background. So you get the picture. With this sustained tone or this pedal tone, I'm cutting across the bars, and this is also considered a pedal tone. All right. Pedal point, pedal tone, same thing. Suspensions. A suspension is an accented non-chord tone that occurs on the downbeat. Okay, downbeat, downbeat. A suspension is approached by the same note and resolves down by a step. A suspension is made up of a preparation, suspension, and resolution, and sometimes the preparation is tied to the suspension. Okay, so what are we all saying here? How do we translate this into layman's terms? Okay, so first of all, a suspension is a tone that currently is a chord tone, but once we change, it becomes a non-chord tone. So in this example, here on top of, here we have the G major chord consisting of GBD, and here we played B. The chord changes to C, and we are still playing B. Okay, so we are suspending, let's say, the use of B. We're still using it once we change the chords, but then there's a very precise way of resolving. So we have to move downward by a step. So it's not left up for chance how to exit. We have to exit by moving down by a half step. So the preparation would be the note that you play when during when it is a chord tone. The suspension is while you are on while it is a non-chord tone, and the resolution. So let's do this. A suspension is on the downbeat. Okay, so let's use A here on G. This is our suspension. And it says that we need to prepare it, okay, by using, very important, the same note while it is a chord tone. So I'm just gonna make it simple. And I'm gonna play A here. We're playing it again. So this is the preparation. This is the suspension. And now we need to exit our suspension by resolving it down to a half step. Like so. By a step, not by a half step. So G is a step down from A. So this is our suspension. This would be the preparation. This is the suspension. And this is how we resolve, or the resolution. It sounds like this. Okay, once again. Sounds very cool. And it says here that the suspension can be tied, meaning held or played. In this example, I have the preparation and the suspension note. It is the same note, but I am playing it here on top of the bar. So I am playing it. I could sustain or hold it like so. So the preparation and the suspension are just one note, or one note event. Okay, this sounds like so. Okay, once again. Cool. That's the suspension. And you could say, oh no, it's the next one. So very important. We approach the suspension with the same note, and we either play it or sustain it, and we have to leave or exit the suspension by moving down a step. So if I were to move up a step like this, that wouldn't be called a suspension. I don't know what it would be. Maybe it's the next one, retardation, but in any case, you have to move down for it to be called a suspension. All right. Next up, cool, we have two more to go. Retardation, usually an accented non-chord tone. Okay, similar to the suspension, which is also accented. Yeah, accented. But the difference is, okay, we approach it by the same note, just as with this suspension. Oh, see, but here we resolve a step up. So in this example, this would be a suspension because we're resolving a step down. But if we were to resolve a step up, now this is called a retardation. Cool. Sounds different. Once again. And just as the suspension, we can play the note or tie or hold it. In this case, it is tied or held. We can voice this note again, like so. So we're playing it two times. Now the preparation and the retardation are two distinct events as opposed to one event like this. Let's take a listen. Cool. Once more. Nice. That's the retardation. And finally, we're going to look at the incomplete neighbor. Let me get rid of this. And the theory says incomplete neighbor because composers are notorious for breaking the rules, of course. Always learn how to use these concepts and then break them. Use them to your advantage, bend them, twist them, make it fit your music. You can encounter examples in the real world that defy explanation or have multiple valid explanations. One utility non-chord tone is the incomplete neighbor. In this case, we have this note D flat, okay, and it is a chord tone here on B flat minor, and let's say our target tone is A flat from the F minor 7 chord. Okay, so this is a chord tone here. This other one is a chord tone here, and we have a very big leap between D and A. Okay, so that's at least a fourth. Not sure if it's a perfect or which one, but it's at least a fourth. So we have a big leap here. So what happens if we place a single tone somewhere in between? Okay, and we could call, and specifically, we're playing the neighbor to this tone because it's right below it. Okay, so this note is a neighbor of D flat, but it's not a neighbor of A flat. So it's a neighbor to this one, but not to this one. So that's why it's called an incomplete neighbor. By the same token, we could have, let's say this B flat has a neighbor on top of it or above, which would be E. Let me see, E flat in this case. If we had used E flat, that would have been a neighbor to this tone, but not a neighbor to this other one. Or let's flip the example. What if we use a neighbor to F minor 7 and not to B flat? So for example, if we had used here, let's say B flat. No, B flat would be a a neighbor to this one. Something else, like a lower G maybe, G flat, isn't part of B flat minor 7, so it would be a neighbor to this one, but not to this other one, so that's an incomplete neighbor. Now let's make this come alive here. Okay, we're gonna land to do a very similar example. Let's land here on G to make it easy on ourselves. And let's say the note that I'm playing here is C. So C is a chord tone to A minor, G is a chord tone to G major, and there's a whole lot of notes in here. So if we were to play not B, because B belongs to G, so this would be a kind of an anticipation, and if I used D, we would get to the same place. So C is not a good example for this. Neither is A. Okay, let's say I'm doing D, possibly. E, D, E belongs to G. F doesn't belong to G. Maybe this wasn't the best example because of the chords, but it doesn't matter. Okay, let's say that we're gonna use F as the neighbor. Okay, so F doesn't belong to G and doesn't belong to A minor, so this is gonna be our neighbor tone. It sounds like this. Okay, now I'm not too happy with this example because F is a neighbor tone to G. So maybe if we went to a different chord, but I'm not gonna do that here. Just in any case, let's assume. Well, I'm just gonna leave it like that. The example was we're bridging the gap between these two notes by using a non-chord tone that is only the neighbor, either the high neighbor or the low neighbor to either one of them, but it's the neighbor of one, but not the neighbor of the other. In this example, musically it doesn't work because of the chords that I'm using. All right. So with that, we come to the end of all the theory and of covering all the non-chord tones. Let's make a quick recap. Now that we went through all the details, let's head back to this table and briefly recap before we create a melody. All right. I hope you guys can still hear me. I'm hearing like some weird stuff on my side. Not sure if something's happening to my mic, but okay, so non-chord tones, we have a passing tone, we approach by a step, and we leave by a step in the same direction, and it could be accented or non-accented. You now know what it means. Neighbor tone, we approach it by a step, and we leave or exit by a step in the opposite direction. It could be both accented or non-accented. Apogitura, we approach it by a leap, we leave by a step, and it is always accented or usually accented. Escape tone, approach by a step, and leave by a leap in the opposite direction, typically unaccented. Double neighbor, see the text, and it could be accented or unaccented. Anticipation, approach by a step, and we leave by the same note, typically unaccented. Pedal point, we approach by the same note, we leave by using the same note. We're just holding or sustaining the note throughout the entire progression, and it could be both accented or non-accented. The suspension, we approach by the same note, we use a step down to exit, it's accented. And finally, the retardation, we approach it with the same note, we have to prepare it, and we leave by a step up, and typically it is accented. Now, of course, it will be great, and if you were taking a class in college, you would have to really memorize all of these, and they would ask you in Apogitura, how do you approach it, how you leave it, accented or non-accented. You have to really remember and memorize all of this. In the context of making synthwave, my recommendation is use them, like I showed you today, and try to incorporate a couple of them in your tracks for real, so you get a feel for how they work, and try to use one or two at a time until you have used them all. And if you use them along with all the other techniques that I've shown you up to this point, you will naturally start using them without thinking, let me use a passing tone, or let me use an escape tone, and did the escape tone exit by a leap or up or down, all of this can be a little technical. Do it like this in the beginning, but hopefully if you use it enough, it'll become like second nature, and you'll immediately see a gap between two notes, and you say, oh, I can use a passing tone in there. Oh, I can approach it by coming from above, and then I will leave it going back in the same direction or go down, and that would have been either an Apogitura or escape tone or whatever. And you start to use these concepts more in a natural fashion and not so scientifically as you would if you wanted to become a formal composer and take music composition classes and go to college and all of that. Those guys do use this very formally like that. But in any case, okay, these are the concepts of the non-chord tones. And let's see if in the next 10 minutes I can put some of this together, hopefully in a way that sounds musical, and see if we can use a couple of them. Of course, we're not going to be able to use all of them because it would sound gimmicky, but let's see if we can find a few of them. Alrighty. Let's see. Let's try to do something simple. I don't want to tackle 8 bars of music. Let's just try to do a very simple phrase consisting of 4 bars. Remember, a motif is typically 1.5 bar or 1 bar of length. You put 4 motifs together, or 4 bars of music, and that turns into a phrase, a musical phrase, a melodic phrase. So let's try to do that. And I'm gonna try to pencil in the notes as opposed to playing them on my keyboard. And let me see if I can find something that I like. So this is a chord tone. Let's make a jump here. Let's make it shorter. Okay, I wanna, like in my mind, I made this big leap, but now I wanna come down like in a few steps. Like something like that. Exactly like that. And what did I do there naturally? That's like the first thing that came to mind. And this is a chord tone. This is a chord tone, and this is a passing tone. You saw there, I naturally just had this idea, or in my ears told me do, and I used a passing tone in a natural manner without thinking about it. Okay, so that's ultimately where you want to get to. So here we used a passing tone. Okay, this is our first motif. Let's write another motif. Maybe it's my headphones or something. Hello, hello, testing, testing. Okay, all right, cool. Let's write in another motif. And just for fun, let's start with a non-chord tone. All right, let's use A for the heck of it. Now, I'm not sure which non-chord tone to use, so let's refer, okay? Now, I'm landing on the downbeat, okay? So it's got to be an accented non-chord tone. So it could be an Apogitura, it could be a suspension or a retardation. Let's see if we can use an Apogitura. So we have to approach it by a leap and leave by a step. Okay, so approach by a leap, leave by a step from any direction. So let's say I'm gonna exit by a step, either to B or to G. Let's give this stability by going to G. Okay, then all we need is approach this thing by a leap, and I could come from above, deal some death from above, or from below, kind of like a shark. Maybe like this. Oh yeah, I like it. You know what? Let me soften up this patch a little bit. It's like the attack is too strong. Kind of killing me. Oops. Okay, cool. And I'm trying to create this melody without any effects whatsoever, meaning delay or reverb, any spatial effects like that, just so I make sure that I write the music that sounds good on its own, that it can stand alone solidly with a lot of strength. And once I'm done with my melody, yeah, I will use delay and reverb as icing on the cake and as kind of, well, the cherry on top. So, and that's an approach that I really suggest. Try to create a good melody without any effects, because they tend to clutter up the arrangement and what you're doing. And you could also, you could tend to use them as a crutch, right? Write really bad melodies, but because there's reverb and delay, you think they are great, right? So write your melodies without any effects, and if they're good, and once you get them to a good place, add the delay and the reverb, and you'll see how they really come alive and sound superb. They go from great to awesome. All right. Let me just bring this down a little bit. Okay, cool. And I'm not going here for like the most awesomest, badassest melody in the history of mankind or a masterpiece. I'm just trying to find something that kind of works in the context of synthwave that sounds good, right? Like not too gimmicky and too disjointed or jarring. Try to go with something that sounds cool, but I don't want to spend 2 hours coming up with like the most awesomest melody you've ever heard before. I really like how we have kind of fast notes here, then there's a pause, and we are stepping into this non-chord tone. I really like that. And if you feel that we step into it, but kind of quickly then step away, it resolves this, what was it? The escape tone? No, the Apogitura. And it's like it greases the whole thing together. It softens the blow, so to speak, as if we didn't have this note here. It's like very strong, like a blow, an uppercut direct to your jaw without this stepping stone note here. With actually the Apogitura provides support, a stepping stone does the same thing, so you can think of it as a stepping stone. Cool. Okay, and let's leave this space here. Always fight your tendency or the desire to fill up all the music, all the beats with notes. Try to show restraint and get a feel for savoring the space between the notes. I don't remember who was it that said that music is the space that you leave between the notes and not so much the notes themselves. Be very comfortable with creating uncomfortable silences and not trying to fill up every space, every nook and cranny with music. Leave a lot of space. And that is going to make your melodies sound better than the next guy who isn't using all of these concepts and these techniques. So with that, I'm going to leave this bar alone. For me, just 2 notes as a motif or as the melodic content of this bar is fine. I don't need anything else. Cool. Okay, and it seems that the contour of this melody is like we're trending downward, right? Continuing with that natural thing that just developed here, let's go to F instead of climbing back to A or using C. And let's give this thing some quick notes here at the beginning. Okay, let's do this. Okay, here I have F, A, these are chord tones, but then from A to F, there's a huge leap, and I want to fill in the blanks with one of the other techniques here, okay? So, I'm coming from below, and if I use this note, it means that I'm escaping using the same direction, okay? So I could use a passing tone, a neighbor tone, because they go in the same direction. No, not a neighbor tone, that would be the opposite direction. I can't use an escape tone because it's in the opposite direction. Step up, step up. So maybe just to make this example better, what if we played C here? Maybe that gives us more options. So we're approaching this from below, and we need to escape or leave in the opposite direction. So for that, it could be an escape tone. We already used an Apogitura, right? Okay, so it could be an escape tone, or it could be maybe like a suspension, or in this case, yeah, maybe a suspension or an escape tone. Let's use an escape tone. So the escape tone says, I approach my escape tone by a step. So this is my escape tone, approach by step, and I leap in the opposite direction. This is not going to work because I can't approach from this note. A step would be B, and I can leap in the opposite direction. Okay, so let's force this thing. We want to use an escape tone, so I'm gonna move stepwise into it and leap in the opposite direction. Kind of like so. Okay, so this is gonna be our escape tone. And it looks similar to this, but it's okay. I'm just trying to find something that works and use some of these techniques. I don't like it. Now, I'm not satisfying the part where I approach it by a step. Okay. Okay, maybe this one is getting complicated here. Let's try something else. What about an anticipation? Let's anticipate one of the chord tones from G. And let's do... And this is the thing, since I'm trying to force on this melody some of these things that naturally, maybe because of the chords, aren't lending themselves too great. That's why I'm struggling a little bit, right? But out there in the wild, if you were doing this for a melody in your track, you would try something that works, right? Not try to force a specific technique. All right, so let's see. We started with F. Let's do A, C, and here I'm going to anticipate using either G, B, or D. This is C, so let's anticipate with D. That'll be cool. And let's drop. Yeah, I like it. Cool. So here we have some passing tones. Here, don't remember what we used. Was it an Apogitura, I believe? Here we're using F, A, C. These are all chord tones, and this is an anticipation. And here, this CB, this is a, oh cool, this is a, what was one of the last ones, an incomplete neighbor. You saw we used it there naturally, because B is, no, it's actually not an incomplete neighbor. C is a passing tone between D and B, and we're just simply dropping from B to G, which are both chord tones. So this is a passing tone. This was a Apogitura. This is a passing tone. Cool. Let's hear it again, and I'm gonna add some effects. Sounds cool. Nice. Yeah, that works for me. And what's cool about this is that since I left a lot of space in the melody, you can hear the delays really well, and they add a lot of character and rhythm to the melody. And you could do stuff like you apply, let's say, bigger reverb, and in the spaces between the notes, if you use sidechain compression, where the notes don't play, you can raise the level of the reverb and have it come up and down and filling those gaps even more. That's also a neat trick that you could use. And you appreciate that. Sounds very cool, sounds nice. Not robotic and static, not like an arpeggio. And once we apply the delay and the reverb, that was like the icing on the cake. Oh yeah, now this could really fit a track. Alrighty, Chozilla says, "Oh, Cole, the pedal tones always catch my ear." Yes, same here. I'm a sucker for pedal tones. Chozilla says, is there always deeper meaning in creating a memorable melody, or do you draw a swell and preview until it fits? I'm not sure I understand your question, but if you're asking, is it worth it to create a memorable melody? To me, that's one of the most important things that you can do as a composer, right? Because you're not just a producer. If you create the opposite of a memorable melody, like a throwaway melody, which is like a bunch of a jumbled hot mess, when people listen to your track toward the end, they could either be bored, confused, or no one remembers your melodies. So just like a great song that you hear on the radio, once people finish listening to your track, at least something in the melody should be stuck in their head, in their mind. They should be able to hum something part of it, or make it so memorable so it's like, I don't remember anything from the track, but wow, that really cool melody grabbed me, expressed some kind of emotion that I felt too. That's ultimately what we need to strive for. And it's very typical when you have music with vocals such as pop, rock, blues, reggae, that much of the melody, the emotion is conveyed with the voice. And in electronic music, not so much. Synthwave is part of is a substyle of electronic music, and there's a very strong tendency on the side of producers to mostly focus on the track, the multiband compression, the sidechain kick, and the great interplay between whatever, right, and using Serum and wavetable synths, and typically leave melody kind of as an afterthought. And the first thing they do is play chord tones, which ultimately sounds like an arpeggio, and the other 10,000 producers are doing the same thing, so melodies are throwaway, right? They aren't memorable. So what's the difference between one house track and the next one, or that one melodic techno track and a melodic house track? If the melodies sound the same, you can't really tell which producer made it, right? So in the case of Synthwave, the same thing. Go on Spotify or YouTube and listen to a lot of Synthwave, and you'll find that a lot of melodies are like the same thing repeated over and over, the same thing as the next guy. So if you really want to stand out making Synthwave or any kind of electronic music or any kind of music out there, do make an effort to learn how to write proper melodies. Maybe not every time you need a proper melody. Sometimes an arpeggio is fine, or some other kind of melodic revolving element, right? Something very simple will work, but do make the effort of learning how to create melody, proper melody, and use it as often as you can in your music so it stands out from the other 1,000 million guys using the same chord progression, the same Lindrum samples, and where everyone is swimming or floating in the sea of sameness, right? Everyone is doing the same thing. So how is your music gonna stand out from the guy floating next to you, shoulder to shoulder? Cool. Let's say, yeah. So definitely, when you write a melody like this, you could say that here we have an A part, then we have a B part or a B motif. It's different these aren't the same, then I'm using a C part here and D. So this melody, you could consider A, B, C, and D. I'm not repeating anything. I could have taken an approach where, let's say this is A, okay, and I would repeat A here melodically, rhythmically, and then adjust the notes to fit the F chord, and then this could have been A, B, A, D, right? So definitely always think of these things. What's the best journey for this melody that you're trying to write? Sometimes it is A, B, like you give the listener the same thing 3 times, and just on the 4th round, you break the expectation or don't meet that expectation. That's cool. Or you can do any combinations of these capital letters like A, B, where you're doing something, you do something different, go back to the first, and then go back to the second one, like A, B. Or you could do A, B, or A, B, or any other combination. Always keep experimenting with that so your melodies don't become stale, right? Kind of like there's an overall structure to music where you have your A section, B section, or whether you call that verse and chorus or build up and drop. For melodies, always experiment with these combinations of sections, right? Where you think of something like this is A, this is B, C, or D, or should I go with A, B, A, D, or A, B, A? Experiment with that. There's no rules, and there's nothing that says one structure is better than the other, but do think about the structures and what best fits the music, or what gets you out of your comfort zone the most. Because once we start writing music for a while, or if we've done this for years, we tend to get into this comfort zone where all of our melodies are, let's say, A, B, right? So get out of your comfort zone and try triple A, B, or double A, double B, whatever, something different than what you normally do. All right, I see Cole. I take my time when writing on guitar. It works great, and playing on pianos, hence I feel it's great. I also get lots of happy accidents writing MIDI, hitting play and fixing it by ear. Yeah, and a lot of this, none of us is Mozart or Beethoven, right? Like we sit down with the music, paper, manuscript, wherever it's called, and we just write notes and they come out perfectly, right? Like we hear this thing in our head and we just write the notes, write them the first time in ink, and wow, this is my masterpiece. A lot of it, like I did here, is trial and error. You do something that you don't like it, and then maybe you say, no, this is too similar to what came before it. Let me do something different. Unity and variety. Give the listener unity, also give them variety. Try things out, see what sticks, scratch it, start from scratch all over again. Don't be afraid to experiment, and use all of these tools, and they will get you out of the bind. They will help you paint yourself out of the corner, if you will. But it is a process of trial and error, and in time you will see that the more melodies that you write, you'll see that you'll tend to make certain decisions over and over again, and in time those will create your signature style. So for example, me, Alonso, I like to use a lot of space, as you saw here. I like to combine downbeats and syncopation, because I'm a drummer, so drumming is all about syncopation. So I try to combine downbeats and music that lands in between the beats, syncopated, and constantly go back and forth between those. And since I'm also a singer and a songwriter, for me, a memorable melody is very important. So I try to go out of my way to write something that I could sing and that sounds cool to me if I were to sing it, to use it as a vocal line for one of my tracks. So I make a big effort in that. And if I were to analyze all my melodies, I would see that I tend to take certain choices or make certain decisions over and over again. And in time, that's what makes up your style, as opposed to in synthwave Time Cop or The Midnight or College or FM84 or I don't know, Michael Oakley, whomever. If you analyze the melodies from all those guys, you'll see that there's some similarities because no one writes melodies completely different than anyone else, but you'll see that they make different decisions recurringly. They do certain things all over and over again. Some other guy does something else every time, and that's part of it. That's what makes every singer, every songwriter, every composer, every synthwave producer different. Hopefully that's where we want to get to. And the reason why I've been doing these live streams regarding melody for months now, or I don't know, weeks, it certainly feels like months. So you have tools and you can make your melodies the best that they can be, so you can stand out in this crowded marketplace, this sea of sameness, which is synthwave, which isn't different from the sea of sameness in house, the sea of sameness in pop, the sea of sameness in rock. There are huge, vast seas of sameness in any substyle. So this is not only particular to synthwave, where a lot of artists sound like each other. Go to hip hop, go to progressive metal, go to whatever. There's always a sea of sameness in any one of those styles, but it's hard to stand out and to stick out because you have to do something different than no one else is doing, or different than the guy next to you. So all of this is trying to build your skills and give you tools. You develop your skills so you can do just that. Alrighty, awesome. And Chozilla, yeah, finding your own musical fingerprint is very hard. Not everyone ultimately gets there because there's no blueprint. Is there a blueprint to becoming Picasso, Michelangelo, whatever, or Dali or Da Vinci? No. They had to create art, they had to create their music for years and years, and by making certain decisions that they liked, pushing the envelope, getting out of their comfort zone, they arrived at a place that they could call their own. It's the same thing in synthwave. It's like it's not going to happen on the first track, your 10th track, maybe on your 100th track, and you have to constantly push the envelope, learn new things, get out of your comfort zone. And if you build your body of work in time, I don't know how many tracks, 50, 100, or 150, you'll find that you'll start developing your style, but you have to be aware that you want to develop your own style and separate yourself from the pack. It's got to be something conscious, right? That you have to make conscious decisions to. Let me try to push this to a new direction. What can I do that the guy next to me hasn't done before? Yeah, the Midnight is cool, Time Cup are great, but what can I do under the general umbrella of synthwave, but that is not the exact same thing those guys are doing, because it doesn't make sense to become a Midnight or Time Cup clone, and there's no blueprint for that, and it's very hard because no one else can do it. Same thing, if you want to become the next Michael Jordan, how can you do that? Or the next Roger Federer in tennis? There's no blueprint to creating your signature style in anything, or in entrepreneurship like the next Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or whatever. There's no blueprint. There's a blueprint for getting your skills to a certain level, the same as thousands of guys out there, but it gets to a point where it's not about how great your mix is and the samples that you use. At a certain point, it's beyond that, finding your own sound, and it can take years and a lot of conscious effort. All right, cool. So I hope that you guys found this useful. Like I always like to say, experiment with everything that I showed you today. Create a sandbox project of sorts like this. Consciously and scientifically use all of these non-chord tones techniques and apply just one or two on your next real track that you're making. And then after that, try to apply one or two. And in time, you'll see that you get a feel and apply all of them. Don't try to use them all at the same time on your next track, because it's going to be like a mumbo jumbo or a hot mess of techniques there, right? So slowly and gradually add all of these into your arsenal, into your tool belt, your toolbox. And but you do have to practice and experiment online, right? Kind of like this, in this kind of setting, in a sandbox of sorts. Alrighty, so guys, as always, I hope you found this useful. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Remember to get the updated version of the melody reference ebook from synthwavedojo.com/downloads for free. No email sign up or bull crap required. Go there, grab it, and be happy, experiment a lot, and let me know how it goes. See you in the next one, and keep synthwaving, my friends, and have a great weekend.